Marriage is like jewelry, looks valuable until you realize it's just glass. My name is Nick Lasker, and I've been polishing other people's precious stones for 8 years now. Funny thing about gems, the fake ones shine brightest under artificial light. Same goes for relationships, I've learned. Don't rush, I have guests too, I said to Clarice, as she stumbled through our apartment door at 2:47 a.m., reeking of wine and pretension. My wife stopped in the doorway, her literary café owner facade cracking just enough to show the calculating woman underneath. What's that supposed to mean? Nothing, sweetheart. Just that your book club seems to run awfully late these days. Clarice tossed her designer bag, the one I bought her last Christmas, onto our second-hand couch. It's called intellectual discourse, Nick. Something you wouldn't understand. There it was, the condescension that had been building for months, finally out in the open like a festering wound. Right, intellectual discourse. Is that what we're calling it now? She whirled around, eyes flashing. What exactly are you implying? I leaned back in my chair, studying her the way I examine a suspicious diamond. I'm not implying anything. I'm stating facts. You've been coming home later and later, always with some excuse about your precious reading group. Because unlike some people, I have interests beyond counting money all day. That stung, but I kept my voice level. Those interests wouldn't happen to include a certain Serbian intellectual with a YouTube channel, would they? The color drained from Clarice's face faster than water through a broken pipe. Bingo. I don't know what you're talking about. Ivan Djuric. Ring any bells? Tall guy, pretentious accent, thinks Dostoevsky is the answer to everything? Before we deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. She tried to recover, but I'd been watching her tells for 7 years. The way she touched her neck when she lied, the slight pause before answering, the defensive crossing of her arms. He's a customer at the café. We discuss literature, something you've never shown the slightest interest in. Funny, because Maria mentioned he's been hanging around after closing time, quite a bit actually. Maria was our barista, 22, observant and loyal to me because I helped her get the job when Clarice wanted to hire her pretentious friend instead. Maria doesn't know what she's talking about. Doesn't she? Because according to her, you two have been having some pretty intense conversations, the kind that require touching hands across tables and whispering. Clarice's jaw tightened. You're having me watched? I'm having my wife's café watched. There's a difference. She grabbed her bag and headed for the bedroom. I don't have to listen to this paranoid nonsense. No, you don't. But you will anyway. Because deep down, you know I'm right. The bedroom door slammed hard enough to rattle our wedding photo on the wall. 3 minutes later, my phone started buzzing. Clarice, calling from the bedroom like we were teenagers. I let it ring. Instead, I called Jess. Nick, it's almost 3 a.m. I know. Can you come over? I need to talk to someone, and Clarice just stormed out. Jess was Clarice's best friend since college, or so Clarice thought. What my wife didn't know was that Jess had been having doubts about Clarice's behavior for weeks. She'd mentioned it to me at the last neighborhood barbecue, when Clarice was too busy flirting with the host to notice. She didn't storm out, Nick. She's in your bedroom. Trust me, she's gone. Can you come over or not? 20 minutes later, Jess sat on my couch, nursing a cup of coffee and looking uncomfortable. This feels wrong, talking about Clarice behind her back. Even when she's been lying to both of us? Jess shifted in her seat. What do you mean? I pulled out my phone and hit record, keeping it hidden beside my leg. Last Thursday night, Clarice told me she was at book club with you until midnight. What were you actually doing? I was home, alone, watching Netflix. And the Thursday before that? Same thing. Nick, I haven't been to book club in over a month. Clarice said it was getting too intellectual for me. Perfect. I stopped recording and leaned forward. Want to know where she really was? With Ivan, at his apartment. Maria saw them leaving together. Jess's eyes widened. The YouTube guy? But she's married to you. Apparently that's just a technicality now. I spent the next hour extracting every detail Jess knew about Clarice's recent behavior. The mysterious phone calls, the new clothes, the sudden interest in Serbian culture. By the time Jess left, I had enough ammunition to start a war. But I wasn't ready to fire the first shot yet. I needed to be smart about this, strategic. Clarice thought she was playing chess while I was stuck playing checkers. She was about to learn how wrong she was. The next morning, Clarice emerged from the bedroom with puffy eyes and a defiant expression. "I'm sorry about last night," she said, not sounding sorry at all. "But your accusations were completely out of line." "Were they?" She poured herself coffee with shaking hands. "Ivan is just a friend, a customer who appreciates intelligent conversation." "I'm sure he does." "This jealousy thing isn't attractive, Nick. It makes you look small." Small. There was that word again, the one she'd been using more and more lately, like a weapon designed to cut me down to size. "You're right," I said, watching her relax slightly. "I've been acting paranoid. Maybe we should have Ivan over for dinner sometime. Get to know him properly." The coffee mug froze halfway to her lips. "What? If he's just a friend? Why not? I'd love to meet this intellectual giant who's captured my wife's attention." That's not necessary. I insist. "How about this weekend? I'll cook that lamb dish you love." Clarice set down her mug with trembling fingers. "Ivan's very busy. His channel keeps him occupied. I'm sure we can work around his schedule. What's the channel called again?" It's complicated. Literary analysis. You wouldn't be interested." "Try me." She grabbed her purse and headed for the door. "I'm late for work." After she left, I sat at my computer and started digging. Even Djuric wasn't hard to find. His YouTube channel had exactly 47 subscribers and featured him pontificating about books he'd clearly never read. But more interesting were the comments from lonely housewives, praising his deep insights and sensitive nature. This guy was running a textbook seduction operation, targeting married women who felt intellectually neglected. And my wife had walked right into his trap. Or maybe she'd jumped in willingly. Either way, she was about to learn that underestimating a Brooklyn jewelry store owner was a costly mistake. I picked up my phone and scrolled through Clarice's social media friends until I found her inner circle, the group chat where she shared everything. With a few careful keystrokes, I sent them the recording of Jess admitting Clarice had been lying about book club. Then I sat back and waited for the fireworks to begin. The first explosion came at 11:23 a.m. My phone buzzed with a text from Clarice. "What did you do?" I was in my shop, examining a supposedly antique brooch that was obviously machine-made when the message arrived. I smiled and slipped the phone back into my pocket without responding. The second explosion came 20 minutes later. This time, it was a call. "Nick, answer your phone right now." I let it go to voicemail. Then I played the message on speaker while I worked, enjoying every desperate syllable. "I know you sent something to my friends. This is harassment, Nick. I'm not going to stand for it." But the best explosion came at lunch, when Maria called from the café. "Mr. Lasker? You need to know something. Mrs. Lasker just had a screaming match with 3 of her friends in the middle of the lunch rush. Something about lies and recordings. She's locked herself in the office now." "Thanks, Maria. How's business?" "Down. People don't like drama with their sandwiches." "Perfect." I hung up and called my brother Paul. "I need you to cover the shop this afternoon. I'm going hunting." Paul had been helping me run the jewelry store since our father retired. He was 5 years older, twice as tough, and completely loyal. When I explained the situation, his response was predictable. "About time you grew a spine. What's the plan?" "Information gathering. Our Serbian friend is having a book discussion at the library tonight. Public event. I think I'll attend. Want backup? Not yet. This is reconnaissance. The Brooklyn Public Library branch on Court Street was busier than usual that evening. Ivan had managed to draw about 15 people, mostly middle-aged women with hungry eyes and a few genuine literature enthusiasts who looked like they'd wandered into the wrong room. I slipped in just as Ivan began his presentation on the modern relevance of Russian literature. He was exactly what I'd expected, tall, thin, with the kind of carefully cultivated stubble that took more effort than a clean shave. His accent was thick enough to spread on toast, and he gestured dramatically while speaking. Dostoevsky understood that modern man is fundamentally alone, he intoned, making eye contact with several women in the front row. We seek connection, but society has made authentic intimacy nearly impossible. I nearly laughed out loud. This guy was smoother than I'd given him credit for. The tragedy of contemporary marriage, Ivan continued, is that it often becomes a prison rather than a sanctuary. Two people trapped by convention, unable to express their true selves. Now he was just showing off. I raised my hand. Yes, you have a question? I stood up, giving him my best friendly smile. Nick Lasker. I own a jewelry store down the street. Great presentation, by the way. Ivan nodded graciously, but I caught the slight tightening around his eyes. He'd heard my name before. I'm curious about your interpretation of Dostoevsky's view on adultery, specifically in The Brothers Karamazov. Do you think he saw it as liberation or damnation? The room went quiet. Ivan's smile flickered. Well, that's a complex question. Dostoevsky's moral framework was quite nuanced. Absolutely. Take Grushenka, for instance. She represents the temptress who destroys families, but Dostoevsky seems to suggest that the men who fall for her manipulation are ultimately responsible for their own downfall. Would you agree? Ivan cleared his throat. I think you're oversimplifying Grushenka's character. Am I? Because it seems to me that Dostoevsky was pretty clear about people who prey on unhappy marriages. He didn't have much sympathy for them. The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. Several people shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Perhaps we should move on, Ivan said, his accent slipping slightly. Of course. Just one more question. Have you actually read The Brothers Karamazov, or are you just working from Spark Notes? The silence that followed was deafening. Ivan's face flushed red, and for a moment I thought he might actually answer honestly. Instead, he gathered his papers with shaking hands. I think we'll end here tonight. Thank you all for coming. As the crowd dispersed, I made sure to shake hands with several attendees, introducing myself and my business. By the time Ivan finished packing up, most of his audience had my card. He approached me as I was leaving. That was unnecessary, he said, dropping the accent entirely. He sounded like he was from Queens. Was it? I thought it was educational, for both of us. Stay away from my events. This is a public library, Ivan. Besides, I'm thinking of starting my own book club. Something more authentic. He stepped closer, trying to intimidate me with his height advantage. You don't know what you're messing with. Don't I? YouTube channel with 47 subscribers, fake accent, apartment in Bed-Stuy that you can barely afford. Oh, and a habit of targeting married women who feel neglected by their husbands. His jaw dropped. How did you... I'm very good at research. It's amazing what you can find when you know where to look. I walked away, leaving him standing there with his mouth hanging open. But I wasn't done yet. The next morning, I visited 3 other library branches in Brooklyn. Each one had a community bulletin board, and each board now featured a flyer about Ivan's literary discussions, complete with screenshots from his YouTube channel and a detailed breakdown of his actual educational background. Turns out our intellectual giant had dropped out of community college after 1 semester. By noon, My phone was buzzing with angry texts from Clarice, but I was too busy to read them. I had an appointment with Mr. Klein, my lawyer. Divorce? Klein asked, peering at me over his reading glasses. Not yet. I want to know my options first. Smart man. Document everything. And I mean everything. Photos, recordings, witnesses. New York is a no-fault state, but evidence of adultery can still affect property division. What about her business? The café? If you can prove marital funds were used to start or maintain it, you might have a claim, especially if you can show she's been using it as a meeting place for her affairs. I left Klein's office with a clear action plan and a renewed sense of purpose. Clarice thought she was playing games, but games have rules, and I was about to teach her that breaking the rules had consequences. That evening, I was back at my computer when Paul called. "You need to see this," he said. "Check Ivan's YouTube channel." I pulled up the page and found a new video posted 2 hours earlier. Dealing with toxic masculinity in modern relationships. In it, Ivan, accent fully restored, talked about aggressive husbands who feel threatened by their wives' intellectual growth. He never mentioned names, but the description was obviously aimed at me. "Pathetic," Paul said over the phone. "Guy's got fewer subscribers than a high school garage band. Maybe we should help him with that." "What do you mean?" "I mean, maybe it's time more people knew about Ivan's approach to literary analysis." I spent the next hour creating anonymous accounts on various social media platforms. Then I started sharing Ivan's video, along with screenshots of his fake credentials and recordings from the library event, to Brooklyn community groups, book clubs, and literary forums. By midnight, Ivan's comment section was a war zone. By morning, his video had been reported enough times to get flagged for review. But the real victory came when Maria called from the café. "Mr. Lasker, 3 people came in this morning asking if we were the place where that fake intellectual hangs out." Mrs. Lasker looked like she wanted to disappear. "How's she handling it?" "Not well. She's been on her phone all morning, arguing with someone, and she keeps looking over her shoulder like she expects reporters to show up." I hung up and smiled. The game was just getting started, and I was already winning. My phone buzzed with another text from Clarice. "We need to talk. Tonight." I typed back, "Can't tonight. Book club." For the first time in months, I had the upper hand, and I intended to keep it. Clarice was waiting for me when I got home, sitting at our kitchen table with a bottle of wine and an expression that could freeze lava. "Sit down," she said. "I'd rather stand. This won't take long. You've been sabotaging Ivan." "Have I? That's a serious accusation." She pulled out her phone and started reading. Anonymous reports about his credentials, fake social media accounts attacking his videos, harassment at his public events. Sounds like someone's been doing their homework. This has to stop, Nick. I walked to the refrigerator and grabbed a beer, taking my time opening it. What has to stop? The stalking, the harassment, the pathetic attempts to ruin an innocent man's reputation. "Innocent?" I laughed, and the sound was harsh enough to make her flinch. "Your boyfriend is running a con game, Clarice. He targets married women, feeds them intellectual garbage, and manipulates them into thinking their husbands are beneath them." "He's not my boyfriend." "Right. He's just the guy you've been sneaking around with for 2 months. The one you lie about constantly. The one you think about when you're pretending to care about our marriage." She stood up, wine sloshing in her glass. "You don't understand what Ivan and I have." "Oh, I understand perfectly. You have a middle-aged crisis and he has a YouTube channel with 50 subscribers, match made in heaven. This is exactly what I'm talking about. Your crude, simplistic view of everything. Ivan appreciates my mind. Ivan appreciates your loneliness. There's a difference." Clarice threw her wine glass at the wall. It shattered against our wedding photo, leaving red stains on the glass like drops of... "Look what you made me do," she screamed. "I made you throw a tantrum? That's interesting. What else am I responsible for? Your affair, Your lies? Your complete disregard for our marriage vows? She grabbed her purse and headed for the door. I'm staying at Jess's tonight. No, you're not. She stopped, hand on the doorknob. What? Jess doesn't want to see you. Neither do most of your other friends. Something about trust issues. The color drained from her face. What did you do? I told them the truth. Amazing how that works. She yanked the door open and stormed out, but not before I heard her sob. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. Instead, I cleaned up the broken glass and called Paul. How'd it go? He asked. She's rattled, probably headed straight to Ivan's place. Want me to follow her? No need. I already know where she's going. What I didn't tell Paul was that I'd been tracking Clarice's phone for weeks. A simple app installed during one of her long showers that gave me her location in real time. Technically illegal, but divorce court was still months away. Sure enough, the little dot on my screen was moving toward Bed-Stuy, straight to Ivan's building. I gave them an hour to settle in, then made my move. Ivan lived in a converted warehouse that had been chopped up into tiny apartments, the kind of place where the walls were thin and privacy was a luxury nobody could afford. I found his door on the 3rd floor and knocked softly. Who is it? Ivan's voice, nervous and thin. Building maintenance. Water leak in the apartment below. Need to check your bathroom. I heard whispered conversation, then footsteps. The door opened, and Ivan peered out through the chain lock. I didn't call for maintenance. You didn't have to. Mrs. Patterson downstairs is flooding out. Either I check your pipes now or you explain to the landlord why his building is underwater. Ivan hesitated, then unlocked the chain. The moment the door swung open, I pushed past him into the apartment. Hey, you can't just... Nice place, I said, looking around at the cramped studio. Very authentic, struggling artist vibe. Clarice emerged from the bathroom, hastily dressed and furious. Nick, how did you find us? Lucky guess. I turned to Ivan, who was standing by the door like he might run. We need to talk, you and I. I'm calling the police, Clarice said, reaching for her phone. Go ahead. I'm sure they'd love to hear about your boyfriend's YouTube scam. Did you know he's been using the same approach on at least 6 other married women? Ivan went pale. That's not true. Isn't it? Julia Martinez, Rebecca Chen, Sandra Williams. Should I continue? How do you know those names? Clarice asked. Because I talked to them. Turns out Ivan has a type. Married women in their late 20s, feeling intellectually stifled, looking for someone to validate their superiority complex. I pulled out my phone and showed them screenshots of conversations I'd had with Ivan's other targets. Women who'd fallen for the same routine, made the same mistakes, suffered the same consequences when their husbands found out. You're sick, Clarice whispered. I'm thorough. There's a difference. Ivan finally found his voice. Get out of my apartment. Gladly. But first, let me give you some advice. Find a new neighborhood. Brooklyn's getting a little crowded for your type of business. Are you threatening me? I'm informing you. See, I've been talking to your landlord, Mr. Petrov. Interesting guy. Very traditional values. Doesn't approve of tenants who seduce married women. Ivan's face went white. You didn't. I did. Along with screenshots of your YouTube channel and testimonials from your previous victims. He seemed particularly interested in the part about you using his building for immoral purposes. That's not legal. Neither is adultery, technically, but we're not in court, are we? I headed for the door, then turned back. Oh, and Ivan, next time you want to make a video about toxic masculinity, you might want to make sure your own behavior can stand up to scrutiny. I left them standing there in stunned silence and took the stairs 2 at a time. Outside, I called Paul. Phase 1 complete. How's Phase 2 coming? All set. Klein's got the paperwork ready, and Maria's willing to testify about what she's seen at the café. Perfect. Time to turn up the heat. The next morning, I was at my shop when Clarice called. "Ivan got evicted," she said without preamble. "That's terrible. Where will he conduct his literary salons now?" "You did this." "I provided information to a concerned landlord. What he did with it was his choice. His YouTube channel's been suspended too." "Really? I hadn't heard." "Stop lying, Nick. We both know you're behind this. What I am is a husband who's tired of being made a fool of. What you are is a wife who forgot what marriage means. This isn't over." "You're right, it's not." I hung up and smiled. Clarice thought she could fight back, but she was already 3 moves behind, and I was just getting started. The real test would come tonight, at the Neighborhood Business Association meeting. Clarice would be there representing her café, probably with Ivan in tow for moral support. She'd try to paint me as the villain, the jealous husband who couldn't handle his wife's intellectual growth. But I'd be ready for her, with evidence, witnesses, and a few surprises she wasn't expecting. The war was about to go public, and I intended to win decisively. The Brooklyn Heights Business Association met every month in the community center on Remsen Street. Usually about 30 people showed up: local shop owners, restaurant managers, the occasional concerned citizen. Tonight, the room was packed. Word travels fast in a small neighborhood, especially when it involves scandal. I arrived early and took a seat in the back, nodding to familiar faces. Mrs. Chen from the dry cleaner, Tony from the pizza place, Maria, who'd closed the cafe early to be here. Clarice walked in at exactly 7 o'clock, Ivan trailing behind her like a lost puppy. She'd dressed for battle, sharp business suit, hair pulled back, the kind of expression that could cut glass. Ivan looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. "Evening, everyone," called out Janet Morrison, the association president. "Let's get started. First item on the agenda is the proposed parking restrictions on Court Street." For 20 minutes, we discussed mundane neighborhood issues while tension built in the room like pressure in a steam engine. Everyone was waiting for the real show to begin. Finally, Janet reached the end of her official agenda. "Any new business?" I stood up. "I have something to address. The floor recognizes Nick Lasker from Brooklyn Fine Jewelry." "Thank you, Janet. I want to talk about business ethics and community standards." Clarice shifted in her seat, sensing danger. As business owners, we depend on trust. Our customers trust us to be honest, reliable, and to conduct ourselves with integrity, both professionally and personally. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the room. Recently, I've become aware of some activities in our neighborhood that threaten that trust, specifically the use of local businesses as meeting places for inappropriate relationships. Now, the room was silent. I have evidence that at least one establishment has been used regularly for clandestine meetings between married individuals and their extramarital partners. This kind of behavior reflects poorly on all of us. Clarice shot to her feet. "That's enough." "Mrs. Lasker," Janet said firmly, "you'll have your turn to speak. This is harassment. My husband is using this meeting to air our personal problems." I pulled out a folder and held it up. "These aren't personal problems, Clarice. They're documented incidents of unprofessional conduct at your cafe." "What kind of incidents?" asked Tony from the pizza place. I opened the folder and began reading. March 15th, 2:30 p.m. Witness observed Mrs. Lasker and an unidentified male in intimate conversation at a corner table, holding hands across the table while other customers were present. "That's private," Clarice shouted. "Not when it happens in a public business during operating hours." March 22nd, 11:45 p.m. Witness observed Mrs. Lasker and the same male leaving the cafe together after closing, with Mrs. Lasker using her key to lock up. Ivan was shrinking in his chair, trying to become invisible. March 29th, 2:15 p.m. Witness observed inappropriate physical contact between Mrs. Lasker and her companion, including kissing and touching, while customers with children were present. The room erupted in whispers and shocked murmurs. "These are lies!" Clarice screamed. "Are they? Maria, would you please stand up?" Our barista rose slowly, looking uncomfortable but determined. "Maria works at the cafe. She's witnessed these incidents firsthand. Maria, is everything I just read accurate? Yes, sir. All of it. Clarice whirled around to face Maria. You're fired. Actually, I said calmly, she's not, because as of this morning, Maria works for me. I've hired her to manage the customer service side of my jewelry business. The look of betrayal on Clarice's face was almost worth everything I'd been through. Furthermore, I continued, I have security footage from the building across the street that corroborates these incidents. That was a bluff. There was no footage. But Clarice didn't know that. Janet Morrison looked deeply uncomfortable. Mr. Lasker, while we appreciate your concerns about community standards, this seems like a matter for you and your wife to resolve privately. I agree, Janet. Which is why I'm announcing that I'll be filing for divorce next week. But I felt the business community should know that Clarice's Café has been operating as more than just a coffee shop. The room exploded in conversation. Some people looked shocked, others seemed to be enjoying the drama, and a few appeared genuinely concerned about the neighborhood's reputation. Ivan finally found his voice. This is character assassination. Is it? Tell me, Ivan, how many other married women have you targeted with your intellectual seduction routine? I don't have to answer that. No, you don't, but Rebecca Chen might, or Sandra Williams, or Julia Martinez. Ivan went pale. Several people in the room were taking notes or recording with their phones. In fact, I continued, I've prepared a full report on Mr. Djuric's activities in our neighborhood, including his fake credentials, his suspended YouTube channel, and testimonials from his previous victims. I handed copies of the report to Janet and several other business owners. This is insane, Clarice shouted. You're destroying people's lives over your wounded ego. I'm protecting our community from predators who use local businesses to facilitate their cons. Ivan isn't a predator, isn't he? Let me ask you something, Clarice. Did Ivan ever mention that he's married? The room went completely silent. Clarice's face went white. What? I pulled out another document. Marriage certificate filed in Queens County 3 years ago. Ivan Djuric and Elena Petrovich. She works nights as a nurse, which is why she's never around during his daytime seduction sessions. Ivan looked like he might vomit. You're lying, Clarice whispered. Elena's phone number is right there on the document. Feel free to call her. For a moment, I thought Clarice might actually faint. She gripped the back of her chair, staring at Ivan with a mixture of rage and disbelief. You told me you were single. Ivan mumbled something inaudible. You told me your ex-wife lived in Serbia. It's complicated. Clarice slapped him, hard. The sound echoed through the silent room like a gunshot. Meeting adjourned, Janet Morrison announced quickly. As people filed out, I gathered my papers and headed for the exit. Clarice caught up with me in the parking lot. How long have you known? About Ivan being married? 2 weeks? About your affair? 2 months? Why didn't you just confront me privately? Because you would have lied, just like you've been lying about everything else. She started crying then, real tears for the first time since this whole mess began. I never meant for it to go this far. But it did, and now everyone knows what kind of person you really are. What happens now? Now, you figure out how to explain to your customers why they should keep supporting a business run by someone with no integrity, and you figure out how to pay rent when half of them stop coming. I got in my car and drove away, leaving her standing in the parking lot with mascara running down her cheeks and her reputation in ruins. The war wasn't over yet, but I'd just won the most important battle. In a neighborhood where reputation was everything, Clarice and Ivan were now pariahs, and I was just getting started. 3 weeks after the business association meeting, Clarice's Café was hemorrhaging customers. I knew this because I made it my business to know, just like I made it my business to know, that Ivan was sleeping on friends' couches and that Clarice had moved back in with her parents in Queens. The divorce papers had been filed, and Klein was optimistic about our chances of getting a favorable settlement. Clarice's public humiliation had made her desperate to avoid a lengthy court battle. But I wasn't satisfied yet. Not completely. The problem was that both of them were still in denial about what they'd done. Clarice kept telling anyone who would listen that I was a controlling husband who'd destroyed her life out of jealousy. Ivan was claiming to be the victim of harassment and stalking. They needed one final lesson about consequences. That's why I was sitting in my shop on a Tuesday morning, waiting for them to make their predictable move. "They're coming," Paul said from the window. "Both of them, and they look angry." "Perfect. Remember, everything gets recorded." I'd installed a new security system the week before, cameras with audio, motion sensors, the works. Whatever happened next would be documented from multiple angles. The door chime rang as Clarice and Ivan entered. She looked terrible, thin, pale, with dark circles under her eyes. He looked worse, like a man who'd been living on gas station coffee and regret. "We need to talk," Clarice announced. "Do we? I thought we'd covered everything pretty thoroughly." "This has gone far enough, Nick. You've made your point." "Have I? Because from where I'm sitting, you still don't understand what you did wrong." Ivan stepped forward, trying to look intimidating. "You've destroyed our lives." "Correction, you destroyed your own lives. I just made sure everyone knew about it." "You had no right." "I had every right. She's my wife, or was until you decided to play intellectual guru with other men's marriages." Clarice moved between us. "Stop it, both of you. Nick, I know I hurt you, but this revenge campaign has to end." "Does it? Because I'm not sure you've learned anything yet. What more do you want? My business is failing, my friends won't speak to me, my parents are ashamed of me. Isn't that enough?" I leaned back in my chair, studying her face. "Tell me why it happened." "What?" "The affair. Tell me why you decided to throw away 7 years of marriage for a fake intellectual with a YouTube channel." She looked away. "You wouldn't understand. Try me. We never talked about anything meaningful. Books, ideas, philosophy. You were always working, always focused on money and business. I felt like I was suffocating. So you decided to cheat instead of talking to me about it. I tried to talk to you, but every time I brought up anything intellectual, you'd change the subject or make jokes. Because I was tired. I was working 60 hours a week to pay for your café and our apartment and your expensive tastes. I never asked you to do that. You didn't have to ask. That's what husbands do. We provide, we sacrifice. We put our wives' dreams ahead of our own comfort." Ivan scoffed. "That's exactly the kind of toxic masculinity." "Shut up," I said quietly. "You don't get to talk about masculinity. You're a married man who preys on other married women. You're the lowest form of life on earth." I never lied about my feelings for Clarice. "No, you just lied about everything else. Your education, your background, your marital status. You're a con artist, Ivan. A pathetic, middle-aged con artist who couldn't make it as a real intellectual, so you decided to fake it." His face flushed red. "At least I appreciate what she has to offer. You treated her like a possession." "I treated her like my wife. I supported her dreams, paid her bills, and trusted her to be faithful. Apparently that was my mistake." Clarice started crying again. "I never meant to hurt you. But you did. And not just me. You hurt your parents, your friends, your customers. You hurt everyone who trusted you. I know that. Do you? Because you're still here making excuses instead of taking responsibility." I stood up and walked to the safe in the back of the shop. From it, I pulled out a small velvet box. "Do you remember this?" Clarice's eyes widened. It was her engagement ring, the one I'd spent 3 months' salary on, the one she'd stopped wearing 2 months ago. "You pawned it," she whispered. "I found it at Morrison's pawn shop on Atlantic Avenue. You sold it for $800 to pay for your romantic dinners with Ivan." The room went completely silent. That ring cost me $4,000. I worked overtime for 6 months to afford it, and you sold it like it was worthless." Clarice was sobbing now, but I wasn't finished. That's when I knew our marriage was really over. Not when I found out about the affair, but when I saw our engagement ring sitting in a pawn shop window with a price tag on it. I opened the box and held up the ring. This represented everything I felt for you. My love, my commitment, my promise to build a life together. And you traded it for dinner money. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I know you are, but sorry doesn't fix anything." I walked to the window and opened it, then held the ring outside. "What are you doing?" Clarice asked. "Giving you a choice. You can have this ring back, along with my forgiveness and a clean slate. All you have to do is admit what you really are." "What do you mean?" "I want you to say, out loud, that you're a cheater and a liar who destroyed our marriage because you were selfish and weak." She stared at me in shock. "I can't say that." "Then you don't get the ring back." I opened my fingers. The ring fell 3 stories to the busy sidewalk below, where it bounced once and disappeared into a storm drain. Clarice screamed like I'd struck her. "You're insane!" Ivan shouted. "Am I? Or am I just tired of being the only honest person in this room?" Clarice fell to her knees, still screaming. "That was my ring!" "No, it was our ring, and now it's gone, just like our marriage." I walked to the door and held it open. "Get out, both of you, and don't come back." Ivan helped Clarice to her feet and guided her toward the exit. At the last moment, she turned back. "I did love you, Nick, in the beginning." "I know. But love isn't enough when it's not matched with respect and loyalty." They left, and I locked the door behind them. Through the window, I watched them walk away. 2 broken people who'd finally learned that actions have consequences. Paul emerged from the back room, shaking his head. "That was harsh, even for you." Was it? They destroyed a marriage, ruined multiple lives, and showed no remorse until they faced real consequences. I think it was exactly what they deserved. What happens now? I looked around my shop, my successful, profitable, honest business, and smiled. Now I get back to work. I've got a life to rebuild. 6 months later, I heard through the neighborhood grapevine that Clarice had moved to Portland and was working as a barista in someone else's café. Ivan had apparently reconciled with his wife and was driving for a rideshare company. I never saw either of them again. The divorce was finalized without a trial. I kept the shop, the apartment, and most of our savings. Clarice got her café, what was left of it, and her freedom. Maria turned out to be an excellent employee, and my business thrived with her help. Word spread about my no-nonsense approach to both jewelry and life, and I found myself busier than ever. Some people called me ruthless. Others said I was justified. I didn't care about either opinion. What mattered was that I'd learned something important about myself. I wasn't the weak, boring husband Clarice thought she'd married. I was a man who could fight for what was mine and win. That was the last word on our marriage, and it was mine.